the Salem-Keizer School District Budget Committee to order and ask Christy to call the roll.
Rachel Dewey Thorsett.
Here.
Rick Kimball.
Here.
Marcia Atkinson.
Here.
Mark Bateman.
Here.
Chris Brantley.
Here. Lloyd
Chapman.
Here.
Marty Hyen.
Here.
Jim Green.
Here.
Levy Herrera Lopez.
Here.
Adam Kohler will not be here this evening. Paul Kylo.
Here.
Chuck Lee.
Here.
Nancy McMorris Audix, I believe, has been at least delayed. And Betty Patacoli.
Here. Okay. And the first item on the agenda is public testimony on the budget. So if you have testimony to give and have signed up, or if you haven't signed up, there's a sign-up sheet outside. And if you have signed up, come to the podium, give your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Yep, she's coming with the sheet.
Oh. So the first person on the list is John Yoder.
Hi, my name is John Yoder, and I live at 7810 Spring Valley Road Northwest, Salem, Oregon. And thank you for having me today, and so Superintendent Perry and board members and rest of the Budget Committee. Thanks for this opportunity to share some insights into science education. I was a science teacher at North Salem for 20-some years. I was a science specialist for Salem-Keizer for, I think, another 7, and then a STEM specialist as well for a few years. So I'd like to share some insights into what science specialists are and the value they have, particularly in this budget time. I want to start with thanking you for having public forums. When we talk about public education, sometimes we aren't very reflective into what public education really means. And it means just that, we're the public, and it should be public's input on importance and priorities that drive then implementation and development of frameworks, systems, and processes for what the community feels is valuable and important. So I'm here to represent the science interests and hoping to restore the 2 science specialists that were not included in the budget at the current time. With the recent support for science, particularly the March for Science in Salem with over 1,500 folks in attendance, really advocating for science across the board, and particularly in our schools. We need, at this time, to have science specialists. I outlined just a couple quick points of importance for these science specialists. One is next generation science standards, so the new science standards and the efforts that science specialists have in implementing that, supporting those, and there's an implementation schedule. There was at least at one point on when those are coming online, and there's going to need to be somebody that teachers can go to and trust to do that. There's a STEM implementation plan in the district, I know, because I was involved in leading that effort, and there was money spent, committees formed on a STEM implementation plan, so it would be of interest to see where that's at, who's overseeing that, where that is going to move forward. I would put to you that that's another role that the science specialists play and have played in the past. K-5 is really our largest need for science. We need leadership there, particularly providing lesson support, materials, professional development with instructors that may not have a lot of background in science. Many of our elementary schools teach very little, if any, science. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's many schools that teach very little, and in fact, there have been teachers that have talked to me that feel like they're being told not to. So we need advocates as well as supporters for that. I know there's a movement at Oregon Department of Education around a school report card that's going to expand beyond those 3 test scores that seem to drive everything, the reading, writing, math. Salam Noor had a recent article in the paper, and in visiting with him personally, I know that he's really pushing for expanding report card to how much science, how much social studies, how much of these other programs that you have. It'd be nice to see Salem-Keizer out on the front of that. These science PAs could help develop those kinds of support and program and preparation. State legislature currently passed an outdoor school bill. Measure 99 last fall was supported by over 60% of our voters. Outdoor School is a great program for students, for all fifth graders in Oregon. The issue is that only districts and ESDs can apply for funding. So we have 45 elementary schools who have either parent clubs trying to raise money frantically for this, or would be interested if they could have funding. So the school district, it seems, would need to have some kind of mechanism in place that these schools can access funds. Otherwise, they can't individually apply for these, only through the school district. So science PAs show leadership and advocacy for science. They support lesson development. They suggest and provide materials. They do professional development for teachers. And they provide a resource for any questions that teachers or administrators have. So I would encourage you to consider restoring the 2 science specialists for all of those tasks that they have and advocate for more science in our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Mindy Merritt.
Good evening. Superintendent Perry, the Salem-Keizer School District Budget Committee, and members of the board. My name is Mindy Merritt, and I reside at 2381 TL Drive, Salem, Oregon. I'm here tonight to speak to you as president of the Association of Salem-Keizer Education Association. After listening to Superintendent Perry's 2017-18 budget message, I was disappointed that we as Oregonians, as a district and as a community, are even having to have this conversation about appropriate school funding. And that we have a superintendent that's having to face these big decisions, knowing what we already know about what's right for schools and what's right for kids. Our goals as an association in support of our members is to ensure that they have the resources they need in their classrooms. They have working conditions that enable them to create positive learning environments and have the smallest class sizes possible. We appreciate Superintendent Perry's efforts to create a district that is less siloed within departments and will create a more effective and consistent resources and expectations for our staff, students, and families. The proposed budget reflects a significant reduction in licensed FTE that is not reflected in other employee groups. These decisions have 2 significant impacts, the first being an increase in class sizes K through 12. The second significant impact directly involves resources for the instruction of our English language learners and supports for beginning educators. As an association, our ask of you, the Budget Committee, is to give careful consideration to any FTE reductions that will directly impact the ability of our students to succeed. We recognize the importance of teacher retention, and cuts to teacher resources have a significant impact not only to the teacher, but the students they work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Ross Schwartzendruber.
Good evening, Superintendent Perry and School Board and Budget Committee. My name is Ross Schwartzendruber. I'm a taxpayer and parent of 3 children in the Salem-Keizer School District. And I am writing in opposition to funding any personalized learning software or one-to-one Chromebooks as proposed in the 2017-18 budget. Personalized learning software like McGraw-Hill's Redbird may be included in General Fund Object Code 470 computer software, $1,999,000, 780. And one-to-one Chromebooks in 480 computer hardware, that's $1,400,235. These types of computer software and hardware purchases fail to improve student outcomes and create too many risks for our children and communities. More screen time means increased risk of obesity. Screen time reduces opportunities to engage in multiple learning styles like kinesthetics, verbal and environmental, and especially social. Loss of socialization disconnects learners from face-to-face communication and nonverbal emotional cues. Research from University of California, Los Angeles claims that increased screen time may be inhibiting students' ability to recognize emotion. Tablet use has been linked to pain developed in children's fingers and wrists, narrow blood vessels in their eyes and neck, and back pain from poor posture. Some experts believe that children who have heavy users of electronics may become adept at multitasking, but they can lose the ability to focus on what is most important, a trait critical to the deep thought and problem solving needed for many jobs and other endeavors later in life. An adrenaline-driven mentality to learning, like addiction, as one psychologist's research findings prove. As a practitioner, I observe that many of the children I see suffer from sensory overload, lack of restorative sleep, and hyper-aroused nervous system, regardless of the diagnosis. It's what I call screen syndrome. These children are impulsive, moody, and can't pay attention. Excessive screen time appears to impair brain structure and function. Much of this damage occurs in the brain's frontal lobe, which undergoes massive changes from puberty until the mid-20s. Data privacy is also a major concern. Before you approve these unproven technologies, please provide peer-reviewed empirical evidence that funding personalized learning software and one-to-one Chromebooks will improve student outcomes. We've had Chromebooks for a year. Where are the improved student outcomes? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person is Linda Walmark.
Good evening, Superintendent Perry and board members, budget committee members. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. I come as a retired elementary school teacher from the Salem-Keizer district, and I'm also a lifelong passionate consumer of science literature, science media, science travel. And I'm here to urge you not to cut those science specialist positions. In an era of accelerating scientific discoveries, we need to have citizens that are capable of interpreting the cascade of information and understanding the significance of the developments in technology, genetics, climate change, among many other fields of science. Our students need the best that we can offer to remain competitive. So as a nation, we can ill afford to fall behind in our science education. And rest assured, China and India are not cutting back their support of science programs. So this is a time, if anything, to increase our funding for science education, not cut back on positions. And speaking, I retired 5 years ago, and at the time that I left, the real emphasis in science was to teach it as a reading class, to be able to teach the interpretation of nonfiction literature. And so I loved teaching science. I volunteered to teach science for all the 3-5th grade classes in our school. Because it was a passion of mine. And I also volunteered with another 5th grade teacher to set up an outdoor school. The two of us did it, and it was a hugely labor-intensive thing to set up 3 days of outdoor school. If we had had some kind of resource to help us on that, it would have been tremendously helpful. So I speak from the heart when I say that truly a lot of the elementary school teachers do not have good basis in scientific teaching. A lot of them do use it just to teach mainly reading techniques for reading nonfiction textbooks, and they don't cover a lot of science. And in this day and age, any elementary understanding of agriculture acknowledges the need for people to save their seeds to plant for a future harvest. And I really do see, as we go into the future, that with accelerated technology and these demands being placed on people, you would not eat your seed corn. And I think of science education as our seed corn. And if we start cutting back, we are eating our seed corn. That is an act of desperation. We are not there. And I would really urge you, please, we must not do this to cut this back. So please do retain our district science specialists.
That is everybody who is signed up. So is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, then we will close public testimony for tonight. There will be public testimony tomorrow as well. And move on to the next agenda item, which is the committee questions and follow-up items from 2 weeks ago. And that's Superintendent Perry.
All right, so attached to your budget agenda is a class size report. And what we did is we, at the elementary schools, looked at and this is current class size, and we looked at where we were with our current class size, and we put them in grade range and number range. So if you look at our K1s, We have 6% of our K-1s that are over 30, 43% of our, I'm reading this wrong, 15% of our 2-3s and 23% of our 4-5 classrooms are over 30. So this is current. This was an easy way to capture the elementary, and we did a classroom by classroom count. And we then went on to middle school and high school, and we just took one middle school and one high school as, I don't know if you'd call it a representative sample, but to put the information out to you in a way to say, does this kind of give you some sense of our class sizes, rather than doing this across all 11 middle schools and also across all of our high schools. So if this sort of a format works, it could be a format that we could update as part of the budget information each year. Just when you look at the elementary, the way we've reported class size in the past has been about an average, and really an average class size doesn't tell you as much as this chart tells you about our class size. And I think the same thing with middle schools, because you'll see, and high schools, but you'll see that we have at this particular middle school, we have from classes between 4 and 59. And so when you average, that's not really going to tell you a lot about what's going on within that middle school. So this was our attempt to try to give you a better look at our class size rather than the way we've done it in the budget book in the past. The other couple questions that were easy for us to grab, that we didn't have consensus on them to get, but they were quick, easy answers. The question was about what about in-district transfers and out-of-district transfers. So currently we have 408 students coming into our district, and we have 344 students leaving our district. Those numbers tend to be fairly equal. And we have reciprocity, I'd say, with our surrounding school districts. If we decided to do something different with interdistrict transfers, that would have to be a bigger conversation with the board because there's some statutes around that. And then the other question came from Adam, who's not here tonight, but he asked about how many more preschool students were we serving this year versus last year, and the answer is 74 additional preschoolers. We have 40 in our Preschool Promise program, which is an all-day preschool program, and 34 in our Head Start program. These programs are not taking general fund money. They are funded through grants. So if those grants go away, those preschool programs go away. And I believe that was the end of the questions that were kind of quick for us to grab, and the one we had consensus on, which was around class size.
Okay, so are there follow-up questions to the answers to the follow-up questions? Mark?
So I think this report is a great start, and I really appreciate your pulling it together. So trying to put this put the proposed budget into the context of this answer. The drop in FTE was a minuscule change in the class size average. So can you interpret the proposed budget into the charts that we have here?
Not with the swing of enrollment. But if you think in terms of, and I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but 15 elementary positions. So you put that, it's going to depend on which school, where's it at, so, and does a school even have space? So we have a school like Yoshikai that's growing exponentially with students, but is out of space. So every single school has a different look, and to put that into this sort of a format would be tough, just because of enrollment swings.
And is it safe to say that this chart wouldn't look drastically different?
That's what we believe. We will have some differences. I think you'll see the numbers of 30 plus students go up a little bit. You'll have the higher numbers go up just a little bit. We can look at this at the beginning of the school year, which is what we do. We keep a little bit of FTE back and don't assign it out, so that if we have a school that really grows in a way we didn't expect, we can assign FTE. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's a hard one.
This isn't really a budget question, it just is a follow-up on class size. When you talk about Yoshikai, as an example of a school that is, has increasing enrollment and is out of room. If I am a parent who lives in the Yoshikai district and my kid is in a class that's really big, do I have the opportunity to move my child to an adjacent school that has a better class size? Would that be a reason for me to get an in-district transfer?
I believe that is correct.
Anything, Levy?
Yeah, just want to make sure that I'm reading this right. So this means that the majority of our students are in class sizes that are in the low to medium range of class size. The class sizes that are on the larger scale it's a smaller percentage of our school population, correct?
For elementary school, yes. And I say that for elementary school because this is truly a count of every elementary school in our school district. The others are just a representative.
Chris?
I'm speaking now as someone who's spent 17 years in middle schools. It's just an interesting thing that the way you did the survey is 26 to 34 students, because that's 26 students in a classroom is one thing, 34 students in a classroom is a really different thing. And I would just suggest that in the future, if you do it, you break that in half and do 26 to 30 and 30 to 34. Because I think that's a huge difference.
Anything else on these? If not, then we move on to general discussion, both follow-up questions about public testimony and general thoughts and questions about potential changes to the budget if we're thinking of making them. So, are there, Nancy?
Can you talk a little bit, Christy, about your plan to address science, next-gen science standards, science throughout the curriculum, particularly elementary science?
Let me see how far I can get and then maybe put some follow-up tomorrow. And then Kelly, I'm going to let you weigh in if I miss something. I certainly don't disagree with the testimony at all. We also have other subject areas that don't and have not had program assistants or specialists. Social studies is one of them. PE is one of them. And we do have groups that would actually like also that central representation through a specialist, because there's lots of good work they can do. So that's why in this case we were trying to do as much as we could to keep cuts out of the classrooms, which they were still in the classrooms. So we were trying to find ways to do that. There are school districts throughout Oregon that don't have science specialists, and teachers do that work. It won't be as consistent among high schools, just like, but we do have planned core statement committees. We work through the plan for those curriculum areas through that process. If I could wave my magic wand and there were more money, I would put some into some class size first ahead of central support, but there would be some strategic central support across other areas. But my sense and what you hold me accountable is the results is this is as far as we can get with this proposed budget. We also have counselor ratios that are too high. We have classrooms that are too high. So it isn't ideal. One of the things we talked a little bit about is how do you help your science teachers or social studies have time together to work? Because our best curriculum writers are actually our teachers in our classrooms. It doesn't help when you don't have somebody to help convene them, but how do you still do some of that work? Because they are our very best curriculum writers at times. That takes nothing away from the people in the central office because they've been in classrooms, and that's why they're good curriculum writers as well. So I don't know if that totally helps your answer. The issue at the elementary school is around time, and we have been really insistent on a tight schedule so that of time that's spent on reading and math so that every student in our district gets equity of time. And what we found when we were looking at our elementary schools across the district is that as students moved from elementary school to elementary school, there wasn't an equity of time. And some of our schools move 2 and 3 and 4. Some of our students move 2 and 3 and 4 times a year. So we did really tighten with our master schedule. What I would actually hope is we had more time in our school day, we had more time in our year. It's limited, and the thing that the board has said they would want me to do the most is increase their grade reading, increase our language acquisitions of our Spanish-speaking students, and that's where we've really focused our energies. I wish that every student had another hour in their day and we would give them more science, more social studies.
Can I just
Go ahead.
follow up on
Yep.
that before? So does that master schedule include science?
I think it includes little bits. I'm looking to see, Sandy's nodding at me. Small bits, but then you think about a day in an elementary school, and when things get eroded, sometimes that's it. So I could get you a look at what our master schedule for an elementary school looks like as a piece of information I could bring in tomorrow night.
So we lost 2 science specialists. Just a kind of wag on what does each one of those FTE cost, each one of those science specialists? I know there's a range, obviously,
Yep.
but,
And so, just a ballpark is
right,
total loaded cost, probably
With
around
benefits
120,
and-
125,000.
125, you said?
Yeah, they're not entry-level teachers.
Chris?
Given what you just said about some time in the elementary schedule for elementary science, my concern is that we do have a lot of elementary teachers who openly express their lack of expertise in the area and feel very uncomfortable doing those kinds of things. And I know one of the things that science specialists have done over the years is provide in-service on job-alike kinds of days, and just helping to give some ideas about what are the sort of fundamental skills you're trying to convey and those kinds of things. Let's say I'm an elementary school science teacher in the proposed budget, and I recognize, I'm a third-year teacher, I recognize I'm not doing very well with my science time. How do I fix myself?
That's a great question, and probably the need, when you look at the prioritization, the need is more an elementary need, even though, again, 6 through 12 science just as important, but subject area teachers usually have more depth of knowledge. So you would get it from colleagues if you're on a strong science team.
Joe down the hall, who's a real science whiz.
Yeah.
Marcia and then Mark?
I'm curious, we're reducing by 2. How many are left?
None.
None.
So we had 2 for the entire district, which again isn't, when you think in terms of
Right.
2,500 employees, not all of them are science, but.
All right, that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Mark?
So I'm fairly certain we're going to have a proposal to put this back, which means I'm looking for information to be able to evaluate that proposal when it comes. I'm wondering if it would be possible for you to bring to us tomorrow the job description for those positions. That's probably the easy ask. The slightly more difficult ask is almost a point by point. So if these positions go away, if those job descriptions go away, how does that activity take place?
So, and I would also counter with that is that's the exact scenario we have with social studies right now.
Right, but
Yeah.
those are already not in the, I mean, this,
Yeah.
so I'd love to see increased emphasis on social studies. I'm a history guy, so that's where my passion is. But I also want to make sure, in terms of change in the district, that we've got a good idea of what it is that we're talking about eliminating as the specific job description.
Chuck and then Betty?
I guess along those lines, I'd be interested to know that if we were to restore 2 positions, what would staff's recommendation be? Would they be science? Would they be social studies? Would they be counselors, librarians? I think, that's a bigger question that I'd like to get some input on.
Betty?
And if there are any positions restored, are these specialists, are they central support?
Yes, these two positions are central, like curriculum office
So if we
position.
were going to support anything, that's where we would put them back into, not into teaching classroom. Okay.
Marcia?
I should followed up. So in social studies, does that mean we have 0 of those now also?
That is correct.
One of the, it's an issue that I've raised with everyone about the science people. It strikes me that in our desire to get reading scores up, I can't imagine anything more deadly than having kids focus on reading. In that it's not productive at a point in a classroom, and that when you provide activities that are different and interesting and challenging, that provide some reading in as a part of the activity, that there's likely to be more learning, and you'll catch kids who are bored otherwise. And so I understand there's a problem with that without a master schedule, you get kids at different places at different levels and such. But we've invested huge amounts in career technical education because we know that grabs older kids. I believe that supporting other alternatives rather than this reading, writing, math, supporting those things will in fact raise reading, writing, and math skills. And that's important aspect that we need to add to the curriculum.
My question was not related to this. It was in regard to are the Chromebooks replacements or those new?
We did a big influx of Chromebooks, and in part in places where we were removing testing labs. So some of them become testing labs, but we have tried to get more access for testing and for word processing and all those other things we do.
So is that at the high school, middle, or elementary level? That
All.
we're putting them in?
Mhm, yep.
Levy?
So going back to the science question, I think I am very interested in seeing how, if those two positions go away, how is that going to be spread out across the district? But I think Chuck's question is very important. We have many other gaps. So I want to make, while I fully support science, if we get to that point where we're going to be looking at, are we bringing these two positions back and not looking at the other gaps that might exist, that's going to be a concern for me. We already have a deficit of bilingual, bicultural staff in our district, and we have a goal of closing that gap. So if we get to that point where we're thinking about, we have two positions that we want to bring back, I think we need to expand that conversation beyond just those two positions. I think we owe it to a lot of the families that are looking at us for making these decisions.
So one thing we need to think about, either talking about bringing back these two particular positions or just bringing back two positions, is that if we make a change to the budget, we need to figure out where, and I mean, 2 FTE, going from Mike's numbers, would be a total of about $250,000. So we'd need to figure out where that might come from in the budget. And would it be another little teeny increasing class size, or where else might there be that revenue source. So that's kind of something that we should be thinking about. Lloyd?
So, in the budget document on page 40, it shows a beginning fund balance for the proposed budget at 38 million. I understand that that's a number that you won't know until December. But the handout that we got at the last meeting included a closer projection of 41.88 million. So I'm wondering in a broader sense, how is that money flowing through this budget? That if there really is $3 million more dollars or something, then how does that affect the budget document? Or
So actually, following up on that, I have, well, maybe Mike better answer that, and then I think I have a follow-up question.
Okay. If I'm understanding the question, Lloyd, we have an estimated, we have a beginning fund balance, it's an estimate at 38 million.
Mhm.
And then we showed you what we're tracking as the projected ending fund balance for the current year in that other sheet,
Mhm.
the longitudinal one,
Mhm.
for 16, 17. So it won't affect, I'm not sure I understand, this conversation won't affect the budget because we have the 38 million for the beginning fund balance, and then we have a budgeted contingency. You add those, and we don't know if we're gonna end up with the real 38 million, so there's some fluctuation there. But what we do know is that the budgeted contingency that's in the 17-18 budget is money that will be there for the ending fund balance unless we bring a recommendation to the board throughout the year to spend any of it. So I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm not sure when you said, how does it flow through here? I'm not sure I understand that part of it.
So I guess my question, and this may just be something that you explained 2 weeks ago and I have managed to lose track of. How is the beginning fund balance of 38 million arrived at?
Well, it was, first of all, it's an estimate. And so as I tried to describe the last time, we have to make that estimate well before, because we begin building this budget in the October timeframe. So we have to have an estimate that we plug in. We knew that the previous year, the 16th to the current year, 16, 17, 52 million beginning, it didn't end up at 52. So we made adjustments. Basically, it was about a $14 million adjustment over time that we rolled into the estimated beginning fund balance for 17-18. So there are adjustments that happen because we're tracking expenditures throughout the year, and we have projected expenditures as well. So that's part of the difference in the funds, and also in 16-17, the current year, we're spending down the projected ending fund balance because we added back in the 16-17 year as well.
Chris?
Could you talk to us a little bit about, if we were to make a recommendation to you to say, take the money for my proposal would actually be a science specialist and a social studies specialist for our 2 positions. But if we were to recommend to you that you do that, and to take that money out of the cash carryover, which looks like there's 38 million there or so, and then about May next year, you found out that that was a dumb thing to do and that, in fact, you're going to end up the year short, what would you do?
So hypothetical.
Here, I'll answer.
Okay.
We'd make greater cuts in the following year. So we would propose a budget that would probably cut those out.
That would fix the problem a year later.
Yep. And when you fix it in the second year, it's compounded.
The reason I asked that question is because between the last time we met and this time, one of my jobs as a board member is to be on the budget committee for the ESD. So I asked them, what do you do for your for your contingency? And they said, we try to keep it at 10%. So we're already significantly under what other people are doing, and it concerns me if we start taking money to do something that I think is very important, to have curriculum specialists in two areas that I think are getting the short shrift right now. I would really love to see us do that. I just am really concerned about if it ends up being a mistake, what happens? And it sounds like we just cut it the next year.
Well, and just real quick, the other part of your statement was, what if you just spent some of the ending fund balance, the projected ending fund balance down?
The rollover.
Yeah. What I would say is, that's based on projected expenditures. What we would do, if there is a change to the budget, the proposed budget, we'd have to find the funds to support the ad. It wouldn't just be add them, they have to be budgeted. So it would have to come from some other budget item that's already in the proposed budget.
Like the contingency.
Like the contingency.
Right.
Or we reduce to FTE someplace else to pay for the add back.
Okay, Marty, Nancy, and then Mark.
And although I'm not a fan of borrowing from our PERS reserve, that would be a possible location for an additional $250,000, even
That's-
though I'm not a fan that we're borrowing any of it. I was just putting it out there that that's
Yes.
a possible place.
That's correct.
Nancy?
As long as we're talking about projected cost of different add backs, could we be brought a cost of decreasing class size by 1 K through 3?
Sure.
Mark?
So I want to look at the other side of the ledger. Is there any kind of updated thinking on what's likely to come out of the legislature?
It's worse.
Well, I think that we're safe at 8.1. That has become the new floor, and I would have thought 7.8 was the floor at the budget message time. That's what they're saying. I haven't seen the plan for that. And the legislature is working hard on some sort of a deal that would require bipartisan support for some PERS reform, some cost-saving measures, and some revenue increases. They believe if they can get this, there's a path to 8.4 or 8.8. I don't know if that's possible or not, but
But you're pretty confident at 8.1, which was the basis for this budget
yes,
proposal.
yes.
Okay.
I'm not
That was the question.
Yep, I am confident at that. I'm not at all confident there's more yet.
Nancy?
Given what you just said, would it be possible also for you to, would it, because this budget needs to be passed probably before the final number is necessarily known, would it be possible for this budget committee to look at a hierarchy of add backs, your recommendation of a hierarchy of add backs should we end up anywhere above 8.1?
I worry about doing that on a short timeline for approving this budget, only because I think that when we haven't really let ourselves think about there could be more, and I think you want us to have a thoughtful process for that. We do have the ability to do a supplemental budget, and we could, if we see there's more money in the supplemental budget process, we could invite the budget committee to attend that piece of it. That the supplemental process does not require the budget committee, but we could invite so that there was some feedback. I just think, and Mike does have handouts for supplemental budget process, so people know what that looks like. But I think that between now and tomorrow, or whenever you approve the budget, that wouldn't feel like I had enough time to be really thoughtful, because we're at the decisions of, is it decreasing class size? Is it central support? Is it counselors? There's so many competing demands. I think you want us to be really strategic.
So, I guess as a follow-up of that, should this committee not be able to find the money to do anything about science specialists or any other kind of specialists, would it be likely that the district, should there be money, would take into consideration the concerns of the budget committee around specialists of varying types?
Yes. There'll also be some interest in mentors, and so, but yes, we would take that into account.
Paul?
I want to make sure the two employees are still our employees and will be next year, is that correct?
That is correct.
So they haven't been laid off or terminated or anything else?
No, in fact, any of the positions that have been reduced, I think we're down to all but one having been placed.
On the subject, if there does tend to come back to be more money, I think the staff's responsibility is to look at the results policy and come forward with what they think will help achieve the results policy, not necessarily the fact that the budget committee feels we need a social studies, and a science specialist. You know, results policy is what we ask staff to focus on from the board, and that's what your recommended budget is focused on. So any changes, I'd want you to look at the whole thing for results.
Other comments, questions? Jim?
So the one thing besides the results policy that Rick has mentioned is the strategic plan for next year. We've asked the staff to come up with a strategic plan to get us to our goal of all of our students are ready to learn, you know, when they're career learners, when they graduate from here. And I mean, I have a whole litany of things besides science specialists I'd like to add back. I would share the budget committee when we cut 375 staff. I want those people back. We have counselors at a high school level that have 425 to 450 kids, and one graduation coach at each high school. And those are things that can drive results for kids. I'm not saying science specialists can't, but when I ask for counseling type of class sizes, you're talking 450 kids. I can tell you my sophomore in high school has yet to see his counselor. He's not the only one. Those are things that can help drive graduation. Those are things that can drive results for kids. I'm not saying science specialists can't, but we laid off 375 librarians in our district in a year. Now we have teachers doing that work. So if there's a list of add-backs, I want staff to look at our strategic plan. And number one on that list for me is improve the focused K-5 literacy instruction and targeted biliteracy in Spanish. I am still extremely upset with our elementary purchase of our curriculum that we still don't have from Pearson a biliteracy program for our Spanish speakers in this district that meets standards. So if there's a list of things, I've got a list. And it costs about $150 million more than we're gonna see from the legislature. So I trust our staff to look at that strategic plan and our results policy, because that's what our superintendent's held accountable for, and we as elected members of this board are held accountable for. Now, I don't disagree that we need science specialists. This is the argument we find ourselves in because our state won't fund schools adequately, period. And it's frustrating. And the frustration that you're all saying about, I want a science specialist, I want a social studies specialist, is a frustration across the state. I look at those 375 people we cut back in 2008 who were teachers of my kids. they're a little frustrated that they don't have a job or that they had to move to another district. So when we're gonna look at adding things back, I think we better look at our strategic plan that has been developed by our staff, looking at what we want to do for boys and girls. But more importantly, one of the things that I don't know how many of you have done this, I'm not gonna accuse anybody of not doing it. One of the things that Christy asked us to do in her budget message was advocate at the legislature. Talk to your elected officials. They're making these decisions today. 8.1 is a ridiculous amount to put into the state school fund. We know we minimally need 8.4 across the state just to maintain what we're doing today. That means we have a 73% graduation rate across the state. If you want to improve that, you have to put resources into counseling, graduation coaches, programs like Avid. So if you want to advocate for more science specialists, call your legislator and advocate for additional resources into the state school fund. I get very frustrated at this because I deal with it on a daily basis in my job. The passion I have for this is real, but if we're gonna do add backs, I wanna make sure we're looking at our plan of what we're doing add backs. As opposed to doing a social studies specialist that we didn't have, or a science specialist, and I'm not saying they're not valuable, don't get me wrong, but we need to be strategic in how we do add backs so that it really drives what we're doing for boys and girls in the school district. And I trust Christy and our staff to bring those to us, and then I trust us as the collective body for this community to make a determination as to, does the community value it, and will it do good things for boys and girls? That's what I'm gonna make my decision on. And right now, folks, while Christy says 8.1's the floor, I can't sit here today and guarantee that for you. I can't guarantee you for that even if they pass that budget. Because in last iterations of our economic stability in this state, when we lose money, guess what the legislature does? They come back and cut school funding. So if we added back positions, guess what we'd be doing mid-year? We'd be looking at reductions in force that require us to go to our employee group and look at our collective bargaining agreements. I want to add things, don't get me wrong, but we need to be strategic in how we do that. And I implore all of you, if you want your legislator's number, I've got them for you. Please give them a call and tell them that 8.1 doesn't even keep current service level. Sorry, I get a little bit upset about this, but we need to make sure we do the right things for boys and girls in Salem-Keizer. And we have a strategic plan and a results policy that does that for us.
Comments? Further comments, or is that a good note to close on for tonight?
I'm gonna
close
I'm gonna ask a couple questions.
Well
though.
said.
Okay.
Yeah. I heard lots of requests for additional information, so let's decide priorities between now and tomorrow night of what's important in order to approve the budget at whatever point.
So, Chuck?
I'll go back to my comment. I was going to say exactly what Jim said, and I think he said it very well, but I think that I'd appreciate finding out from staff, if we were to add 2 new positions, what their choices would be. And what the consequences of adding those 2 positions would be.
Are there 5 other people for that? So 1, 2. Okay, I think we're at 5 for that, or 6 total. Now, you asked for what it would take to,
Lower class size K through 3
By-
across the district by 1 student.
are there 5 other people who would like that?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Is that an easy number to come up with? Staff?
Yeah.
We
Yes.
have that one.
Yeah, I
I
thought
think,
it
yeah,
was.
we have
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
have that already.
And were there any? Mark?
So I asked for a job description,
Oh,
which I assume
that-
is pretty easy.
Rick?
Huh? I'm not
Oh,
saying
sorry.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Anything else?
There was a question on the master schedule at the elementary
Oh.
level, and I think we can bring a representative schedule in.
Mark?
So this is not something that we talked about directly as an ask before, but do we have, I understand that we don't have final audited numbers until December, but we've got a run rate, and do we have an updated sense of what that ending fund balance is going to be from when this budget was printed? That gives us a better sense of, are we going to be at the 41 or at the 38?
We have in that sheet that we handed out a couple weeks ago with 10 or 12 years on it, it has a projected ending fund balance for 16-17. So then that would be, you could compare that with what the beginning fund balance here at 38 million to see the delta.
And is that the 41 that Lloyd was pointing to?
Right, and
It
I
is.
still get lost about where does that money, I mean, if in fact, I mean, you already have a contingency in the budget. Money that's not in the contingency, I presume, is spent, is in the budget. It is allocated in the budget. So if the beginning fund balance is actually 2 or 3 million more than was imagined, than the 38 million that's here, that would seem to me to be just money that would automatically be rolled over into an ending fund balance, essentially, at the end of 17-18.
If all things play out equal, then you could make that assumption. But as we go through the run rate, as we go through the actual year and experience the expenditures, it's not a one-to-one, dollar-for-dollar comparison. So that's why I keep saying we have to wait until we begin to experience the 17-18 budget, and we update monthly, we're tracking, and we provide quarterly financial reports to the board with a projected ending fund balance. So,
And Mike, isn't that built on some assumptions too? That's built on some property tax assumptions that we'll get from Marion Polk counties based on ADMW counts, which we're not getting a May adjustment this year. We're having to give money back to the state, correct?
that's right, yeah.
So it's based on some things that are outside of our control, Lloyd. If the kids don't show up, then we don't have the ADMW counts. And I know Mike hasn't grown that by like 20% to give us this overinflated budget number, but we assumed the same amount of growth essentially last budget, and we didn't see it. So we don't get a May correction from the state school fund. We gotta pay them back.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and these are just estimates based on estimated revenues. As Jim said, we get adjustments every month from ODE because they're constantly they base all of the distribution on 197 school districts providing estimates. And then, as the estimates prove out or not, month by month, district by district, the revenues are adjusted accordingly. The more kids show up or less kids show up. So it's really, we have to go through the experience of living the budget, living the year. We can't just say, well, there's a $3 million delta budget to budget, so add 3 million and you should be good. We don't know.
Paul?
I think, I'm not sure I understand. I guess this is all too complicated for me. But I think the answer to Mark's question is on page 40 of the budget, and it's line 5400, where the estimate for the beginning fund balance is what the ending fund balance for this year would be.
Yes, in terms of this document. I was asking if, in essence, there was an update because we've got more information.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding, because I can't believe that Mike's going to put in 44 million, or 44 million, and two, that's not going to be close. so.
Rick?
On the 12-year look back you provided 2 weeks ago, and for this year, the estimate was run around 41 plus. Did that include the negative 3 million on May adjustment yet, or not?
Did we? No, we hadn't adjusted
So that takes us down to the 38, I mean,
Yeah.
off the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple math, it takes us down to the 38 right there. Not, you didn't know at the time you were
No.
gonna get a negative, but you
That's
did,
correct.
so.
Yep, you're absolutely right, and that's a really good illustration of how this really plays out
Yep.
from a budgeted number to the actual experience.
Levy?
And I just get really uncomfortable when we hear that these are estimates, these are based on assumptions, to start looking at this as a possible source of covering any gaps. I think the intention is good, but if we're looking at that and so much of it is estimates, I mean, we already heard what would happen if we budget wrong. So that makes me very uncomfortable.
Any further, do you have all the information? Is there anybody who thought they were wanting information that, okay. So in that case, we will adjourn until 6 PM tomorrow.